What do the most successful and wealthiest entrepreneurs all have in common? Like, what principles do they follow? What mindsets do they have? I've been obsessed with answering this question and studying the greats throughout history because I love business. I love building businesses. I love the challenge of it, but I'm also fascinated by outliers, like the people that really are able to achieve more than anyone else. And so this podcast is the Business Outliers podcast. I spend so much time, literally hundreds, if not thousands of hours, reading books, studying podcasts, listening to interviews of truly outlier entrepreneurs and outlier professionals. And I want to take everything that I learn and give it to you in a really easy to understand and really easy to consume way so you can take their principles and their advice into your business. So each episode, I'm going to focus on one particular trait or skill set or pattern that I've noticed time and time again with the world's greatest outliers, the people that are able to achieve the most insane results. And so this episode is all about how the best entrepreneurs in the world obsess over focusing on customer value. I was watching an interview the other day with a female entrepreneur who is a really successful self-made entrepreneur. Like, you wouldn't consider her famous, but she's made a lot of money with a lot of different businesses. And one of the questions in the interview was, why do you find it so easy to make money? And it was like a really interesting and like blunt question. And she immediately answered it and she said, because I find it so easy to add value. And this whole episode that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that time and time again, the most successful businesses, the most successful business owners are obsessed with creating value. I mean, this even comes home true to me because when I first got into the online business world, I was obsessed with trying to build an online business. And one of my very first mentors, he said, he like kind of pulled me aside and like tapped me on the shoulder like it was like a movie or something. But he said, do you want to know the secret to making a lot of money? And of course I was like, yeah, like I want to know. And he said, create a lot of value. He said, as soon as I stopped focusing on money, as soon as I just started focusing on trying to create as much value for people, the money came. And I wasn't actually going to tell that story, but because obviously he's not one of the world's greatest entrepreneurs. He was just like a mentor of mine here in Australia. But that really had like a big impact on me because when I implemented that, that was the same. And this entire podcast series, like this video series, is like an example of that as well. Because here I am giving as much value to you as possible, and in the sense that I know that eventually it comes back around. And so this isn't just made up. Time and time again, some of the world's greatest entrepreneurs have not only focused on this, but made it their number one priority, which is crazy. All right, so let me start with Jeff Bezos. So obviously Jeff Bezos, currently richest person in the world, I think, at the moment. Or maybe Elon is, not sure. But he's up there, right? So if you're the richest person in the world, you probably know how to run a successful business, okay? I've watched so many interviews of him over the last like 20 years. And if you watch every single interview, he essentially says the same thing over and over again in every single interview. And he has this quote where he says that at Amazon, we want to be the world's most customer-centric company. And he says those words over and over again. We're the world's most customer-centric company. Our mission is to be the world's most customer-centric company. And it's unusual, right? Because you think of Amazon as just like a online store to buy, books and products and everything. It's just, from the very start, his obsession was, we will be the world's most customer-centric company. And so what do you mean by like customer-centric company? He essentially wanted to make sure that no matter what they did, it was the customer that always came first. Okay, so he's got a really famous story. If you've ever seen that famous picture of him starting Amazon in I think it was like his parents' garage or something like that. There's a really famous photo. I'll try and get it up maybe on the screen of like the Amazon sign was just like this big cardboard sign with like spray painted the Amazon logo. Like this story is so cool because when they started off, he was famously frugal. So he wasn't trying to get a fancy office. In fact, every new employee that came in, I think he made them buy their own desk. Or if they didn't want to buy their own desk, he would go and just get like a piece of wood from the hardware store and then like create some like makeshift legs on it. And when he was like criticized for this, his answer was simple. He said, our goal is to stay as frugal and as lean as possible and not overexpand on any part of the business as possible, because our goal is to create value for customers. And the more money and cash flow that we have spare from not spending on this stuff, those savings can be passed on to the customers. All right. So that's like a very extreme example. He was extreme in other ways as well. Like he's got this really famous terrified quote. I'm going to read the full quote instead of paraphrasing because it is important. He says, I remind my employees, this was in one of his shareholder letters, I think in 1998 or 1999, like before Amazon was like a multi-billion-dollar brand, before he was one of the richest people in the world. This is what makes this stuff so cool. He says, I remind my employees to wake up every morning terrified, not of our competition, but of our customers. They are the ones we owe great obligation, and we consider them loyal to us right up until someone else offers them better service. And so he had this like staff culture from the start, which was we are obliged to serve our customers and we're not focused on our competition. And he had like lots of quotes on his competitors as well, because obviously there was a lot of competitors in the .com boom, and there's a lot of competitors selling books, which Amazon first started with. And he said, we're not focused on our competitors. We're focused on our customers. In fact, I want us to be terrified that we'll let our customers down. Like every day we want to wake up and be terrified. And it's funny because he's received a lot of criticism for that quote over the years, and people like taking it to extreme examples. There's a really funny story that went viral, I think on LinkedIn the other day, which is like this guy saying, when I was an early employee at Amazon, and I was at home and our fire alarm started going off, and my girlfriend at the time was saying, John, what do we do? The fire alarm's going off. There's a fire in our apartment. And at the same time, he got a ping from Jeff Bezos that one of the Amazon servers had gone down, and he had to make this choice whether it was to save his girlfriend in the apartment or fix the Amazon service. And he remembered that his main priority was to serve the customers, and he would be terrified at letting customers down. So he decided to stay in his burning apartment and fix the Amazon servers. And then he says it's obviously like a joke story, because then he says his girlfriend rips off her mask and it's not actually his girlfriend, it's actually Jeff Bezos in disguise. And he said, well done, Padawan, you have passed the test and you have been promoted to vice president or something like that. Anyway, it's a ridiculous story. It's not true, but it was just kind of a tongue-in-cheek dig at the Amazon culture in the early years. But this is obvious. Like Jeff Bezos was ahead of his time. He's got another famous quote, which was, when you have a good or bad experience before the internet, you would tell 6 friends on average about that good or bad experience. Whereas with the internet, people now tell 600 friends. You know, they post a review online, or they post something on their social media, or something like that. And these reviews spread so much. And he was a pioneer. He knew the network effects of the internet. And so that's why he was so focused on it, because he knew that older businesses before the day of the internet could get away with not over-delivering on their customers. Whereas in this new day and age where everything's so transparent, like Google reviews, Facebook reviews, Trustpilot reviews, like everything is just out there. Even Reddit, like you can just type in any business name and there'll be like forums on Reddit dedicated to people complaining about that business. It's just like, it's so important in this day and age to delight the customers and focus on the customers. So, and he understood that. One more famous quote from Jeff before I move on to the next famous entrepreneur is that he said, it was about when he was criticized early on with not helping the stock price of Amazon go up fast enough. Shareholders and stockholders are constantly pressuring the CEO and the board to make the stock price go up. And Jeff Bezos was famously resilient to this. And he would always be criticized that, Amazon was always unprofitable. He would always be reinvesting all the money back into research and development, back into warehouse design to make shipping and logistics more efficient so customers could order the products and get their orders faster than anyone else. And so any kind of money that they would generate, he would just reinvest back into like crazy innovations to try and delight the customer. And he was criticized heavily for this because for years and years, Amazon was losing money, wasn't making a profit. He held so steady in his belief and just said, he has got a really famous quote where he said, the best way to make our shareholders rich is to focus on the customer first. And so he knew that if he just had this long-term time horizon and just concentrated on delighting the customers and not making a profit, that would eventually come back tenfold, hundredfold, thousandfold. And obviously he was right, because he ended up building one of the most profitable businesses ever, right? And like, I know it's like for us as small business owners, this is a bit more difficult because, we do have to make a money, but I like to think of it around like, well, how much money do we need to make initially? Like if the goal is like long-term profits, like can we delay gratification for ourselves and maybe make less money early on in order to make much more money later, especially if we can focus on taking that money and then reinvesting in ways that create word of mouth and create network effects. If we can get that kind of flywheel happening, it becomes much easier to grow the business and much easier to get those profits later on. So for example, like to take an extra $30,000 to $50,000 out of my business this year, like that's $30,000 to $50,000, like, oh, that's pretty cool. But then if I reinvest that into creating delightful experiences and creating customer delight, and it creates like positive word of mouth, and as a result, 5 years from now, the business is doing millions per year more, like that $30,000 has compounded into something great, but much greater, right? And so I think for us as business owners, we constantly have to try and find this fine line between, yes, taking profits now and paying ourselves, which traditionally like we're really bad at, right? But also trying to think long term, like Jeff did here. I think the final thing as well is Amazon Prime. Like everyone should know what Amazon Prime is. Their subscription service. Like this is the thing that was, I guess, the most prolific example of Jeff's dedication to creating value for the customers. Because when he launched Amazon Prime, it was a crazy offer. It was like for $99 a month or whatever it was. I don't even know how much it was when it started. But you could get free shipping and next day delivery on basically anything. And so it created like huge stress and huge losses for his company to try and figure this out. But it was a way of him being like, if we can figure this out, we will dominate the industry because no one else will want to go anywhere else. They'll get discounts with us, they'll get free shipping, they'll get same day delivery or next day delivery, all for like a cheap price. And now there's 200 million people subscribed to Amazon Prime every single month. 200 million. Like I'm in Australia, we only have 20 million or so people here. So you would need to take every single person in Australia, the whole freaking country, and then get 10 Australias just to match the amount of people that are subscribed to Amazon Prime. It's absolutely crazy. And so that was another great example of him doubling down, backing his beliefs, focusing on the customer over short-term profits, and being rewarded as a result. The next outlier business owner that I want to talk about was Sam Walton, so founder of Walmart, obviously extremely successful multi-billionaire. And he had the exact same trait, coincidentally, which was everything was focused on the customer. His competition was focused on so many different avenues, and he came in and said, we're going to not focus on anything except delighting the customer. So that means that everything that we do, the way the store is designed, the type of employees that we hire, the tasks we get our employees and our customer service reps to do, how they treat the customers, it's all designed around delighting the customer. But most importantly, he said that we will just be the lowest price. Like that's how we're going to delight the customer the most, all right? Create the lowest prices and do whatever we can to do that. And obviously he ran into like a lot of issues trying to obviously undercut always, but it was this like relentless focus on being the best customer service and the cheapest price that allowed him to dominate. Both Jeff and Sam had like this relentless focus on cheap pricing and being the lowest pricing, right? But that is not always the case. Just because you're trying to create value doesn't mean you should just be the cheapest. The next example of an outlier entrepreneur is James Dyson, who invented the Dyson vacuum. And he was almost the complete opposite of this. So when Jeff and Sam were focused on creating value by being cheap, he tried to create value another way. And as a result, was incredibly successful. So people hated the way old vacuums worked. They didn't have enough power. People hated like changing the bags and emptying them. And people most hated the fact that you had to subscribe or I guess buy these bags all the time to refill for your vacuum. And so it was a huge moneymaker for vacuum companies. So when James Dyson came out and told everyone in his industry that he was going to make a bagless vacuum, he was scoffed at and laughed at because he was ruining like one of the best revenue streams for vacuum companies, which was this repeated buying of the vacuum bags. If you remember why Blockbuster was such a profitable company, it was because of late fees. They made all of their money from late fees. And so their business model was designed around basically taking advantage of a poor customer experience. And so Netflix came along and said, we're just going to do the same thing that you guys are offering for your customers, but no late fees. And it revolutionized the whole industry, right? And Blockbuster famously went bankrupt. But it's the same concept. It's James Dyson saw that the customers were not happy, but were kind of stuck in a corner and were just kind of forced to do what these companies were telling them to do because they had no other option. And so he famously, I mean, in the stories, it says he did 5,124 prototypes before he finally got the one that worked. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's an exaggeration, but the point is he kept going relentlessly to try and get a vacuum that would delight the customer. And then, and this is the kicker, so when he released the vacuum, and this is, again, he got laughed at, he priced it like 3 times, like higher, 3 times more expensive than every other vacuum on the market. This whole episode is around how the best entrepreneurs and the richest entrepreneurs are obsessed about creating value. He charged 3 times more, but the value that he created for the customer was worth it. And so people were more than happy, in fact, delighted to get rid of their old bag vacuums that were heavy and didn't work that well, and they hated emptying, and pay 3 times more for a Dyson vacuum, which they could empty really easily and had heaps of power and was just a delightful vacuum to use. All right. So just because you're trying to create value for your customers doesn't mean be cheap, doesn't mean be the lowest price. James Dyson proves this, and time again, we know that there's that classic meme of like the $40 client versus the $4,000 client, and like the $40 client has all of these complaints and expectations, and the $4,000 client just is happy, sends the money, and is just delighted with the product straight away. Like people that pay more tend to value it more, and James Dyson knew this straight away. Speaking of delighting customers, this is a really famous customer service story by the brand Zappos. So Zappos was an online shoe store, was widely successful, and the late Tony Hsieh was the founder of that company. And he was constantly focused on just over-delivering from a customer service point of view. And so he's got this really famous story that he was at a conference, and at the end of the conference, they went back to Tony's hotel room, and there was a group of like 5 or 6 of them. And they were all really hungry from this conference, and it was like 2 a.m. in the morning, and so everything was closed, room service was closed. And Tony said, guys, go onto the Zappos website, which was a shoe website, mind you. Like there was, like this is, like all they did was sell shoes. He said, go onto the Zappos website, talk to customer service, and ask them for some food. Because he was so confident that the customer service would over-deliver, that they would be able to help them. And sure enough, They listened to his test, they went onto the website, and then went online and basically said, hey, we are at the hotel room, like everything's closed. Can you help us? And the customer service rep then ordered them pizzas and got them pizzas delivered to the hotel room. And Tony was there just to prove his point. He was like, this is exactly what we were trying to achieve, is just over-delighting our customers. And so like that pizza story just spread like wildfire because Zappos was known as the company that would do anything for their customers, really. And Zappos had like a really famously low marketing budget and like low advertising spend. So they basically spent no money on advertising, no money on marketing. And Tony, the founder, he would constantly say, he said, any spare money that we had, which other companies would traditionally put into advertising or put into marketing, we would take that money instead and put it into customer service and pay for more staff members, pay for better quality staff members, people that cared more. And he said, because we did this, we didn't actually have to spend money on marketing and advertising because our customers did the marketing and advertising for us. I thought that was really cool. Finally, to like wrap this up, I want to do 2 key quotes from Steve Jobs, obviously one of the most famous entrepreneurs ever. But he obviously shared this as well. So he said, start with the customer experience and work backwards toward the technology, not the other way around. So Apple, famously a technology company that creates amazing tech. He said his competition was so focused with the tech and what they were able to do with the tech that they created like infamously complicated products. Like if you look at like the early smartphones, how complicated they were and how many keys and buttons they had and pens and everything attached. And he said, no, we need to start with the customer first, the customer experience, and then work back and figure out what technology we need to make from there. And obviously the iPhone, the iPod was born out of that. His other famous quote was, our belief was beautifully simple. If we kept putting great products in customers' hands, they'll gladly open their wallets. So, and this comes back to what I said at the start, which is focusing on delivering value instead of making money makes way more money than focusing on making money. We overcomplicate things. I overcomplicate things in business as well. And sometimes it is important just to make offers and, create call to actions, to get the sale. Speaking of which, I've got a call to action for now. If you're the type of person that's watched this and is interested in this stuff, you're probably like me. You're a bit weird. You love business. You love studying success, but you probably want to be around other people that like talking about this, that like building businesses and growing and trying to be better versions of themselves. And so I'm starting a small mastermind group called the Outlier Founders Club. And it's for people that want to be outliers, but also want to be surrounded by outliers. So I've got a link below this video that you can apply to join that group. It is a paid membership, but like everything from this podcast episode, my sole focus for that membership fee is to create as much value for the members as possible. So much value that they never want to leave. All right. So final quote that I found, your business exists not to make money, it exists to create value. And when I heard that quote, I thought it was a really awesome way to finish this episode. So that's episode 1 of Business Outliers done. Next episode, we're going to be concentrating on another really common trait with that a lot of the world's most successful entrepreneurs have in common. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk soon.